The bitter wind howled through the mountain pass like a chorus of wolves, and Violet Garrett pressed herself against the rocky outcrop, her thin dress offering no protection against the February cold that cut through to her bones. She had been running for 3 days now, ever since she had witnessed the murder of the stagecoach driver and escaped into these God-forsaken hills above Deadwood, South Dakota, and the men who had killed him were still hunting her. Her whole body shook violently, trembling from both the freezing temperature and the paralyzing fear that gripped her heart every time she heard a sound in the distance. The year was 1878, and women did not survive long alone in these mountains, especially not in the dead of winter with killers on their trail. Violet tried to take another step, but her legs buckled beneath her. She had not eaten in 2 days, and the cold had sapped what little strength remained in her 22-year-old body. Her dark hair hung in tangled waves around her pale face, and her lips had taken on a bluish tint. She knew she was dying. The realization came with strange clarity as she sank down into the snow, her back against the cold stone. At least the men would not find her. At least they would not do to her what they had threatened before she had run. She closed her eyes, feeling the deadly drowsiness that came with freezing to death beginning to pull her under. Her thoughts drifted to her family back in Boston, to the life she had left behind when she had foolishly agreed to come west with her aunt and uncle. They had promised her adventure, a fresh start after her father's business had failed. Instead, they had died of cholera in Cheyenne, leaving her alone and desperate, taking whatever work she could find. The stagecoach job had seemed like a blessing, riding from Cheyenne to Deadwood with mail and small packages. Now it would be her grave. The sound of hoofbeats broke through her fading consciousness. Violet's eyes snapped open, terror flooding back through her veins. They had found her. After all her running, all her hiding, they had finally tracked her down. She tried to stand to run, but her body would not obey. She could only watch as a lone rider appeared through the swirling snow, a dark silhouette against the white landscape. The man on horseback was tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a heavy coat and a wide-brimmed hat pulled low against the wind. As he drew closer, Violet could see his face, weathered and tanned, with a strong jaw covered in several days' worth of stubble. His eyes were a startling blue, sharp and assessing as they took in her huddled form. He dismounted in one smooth motion, moving toward her with purposeful strides. "Please," Violet managed to whisper through chattering teeth. "Please do not hurt me." The man stopped, his expression shifting from concern to something gentler. "Madam, I am not here to hurt you. Name is Fletcher Rourke. I have been tracking the men who killed that stagecoach driver for the past 3 days, and I found your trail yesterday. You need to get warm right now, or you will not make it another hour." His voice was deep and steady, with a slight drawl that marked him as someone who had spent years in the territories. Violet wanted to believe him, wanted to trust the genuine concern she saw in those blue eyes, but fear had become her constant companion. She flinched when he reached for her, and Fletcher immediately pulled back, holding his hands up where she could see them. "I know you are scared," he said quietly. "I know you have been through hell, but I am a bounty hunter and I have been hired to bring in the gang that has been terrorizing the stage routes. I found the driver's body, and I found signs that someone else had been there, someone who ran." "That was you, was it not?" Violet nodded slowly, her teeth chattering so hard she could barely speak. "They killed him, shot him in cold blood when he would not tell them where the payroll was hidden. I was in the back, hidden under some canvas. They did not know I was there until I tried to run." Fletcher's jaw tightened, anger flashing in his eyes. "How many were there?" "5," Violet managed. "5 men. The leader had a scar across his face from his eye to his chin. "Jack Malone," Fletcher said grimly. "I have been after him for 6 months. He is as mean as they come and his gang is worse. But right now, we need to get you somewhere warm. Can you stand?" "I do not think so," Violet admitted, hating how weak she sounded. "I cannot feel my feet anymore." Without another word, Fletcher shrugged off his heavy coat and wrapped it around her shoulders. The warmth from his body still clung to the fabric, and Violet nearly wept at the sensation. Then he bent down and carefully lifted her into his arms as though she weighed nothing at all. Violet stiffened at first, but the cold was too much, and she found herself curling into his chest, seeking any warmth she could find. "There is a line shack about 2 miles from here," Fletcher said as he carried her to his horse. "It is not much, but it has a stove and walls. We will hole up there until this storm passes, and you are strong enough to travel." He somehow managed to mount his horse while still holding her, settling her across his lap before urging the animal forward. Violet kept her face pressed against his chest, trying to absorb his warmth through her trembling body. She could feel the steady beat of his heart beneath her cheek, strong and reassuring. His arms around her felt safe in a way she had not felt safe in days, maybe longer. The ride seemed to take forever, though it could not have been more than half an hour. Violet drifted in and out of consciousness, lulled by the horse's movement and the exhaustion that pulled at her. Each time she started to slip away, Fletcher would speak to her, his deep voice pulling her back. "Stay with me now. Tell me about Boston. You are from back east, I can tell from your accent." "My father was a banker," Violet mumbled. "Before he lost everything, I had 3 brothers, all older. They thought I was useless, just a burden. Maybe they were right." "I doubt that," Fletcher said. "Any woman who can survive 3 days in these mountains in winter with killers on her trail is far from useless. You are tougher than you know." His words warmed her almost as much as his coat. When they finally reached the line shack, a small, rough cabin set back in a stand of pines, Violet was barely conscious. She was dimly aware of Fletcher dismounting and carrying her inside, of him laying her down on a narrow bunk and covering her with blankets. Then she heard the strike of a match and the crackle of kindling catching fire. Time passed strangely. Violet was aware of Fletcher moving around the cabin, of warmth gradually seeping back into the small space as the stove heated up. At some point, he knelt beside the bunk and began carefully removing her wet shoes. She wanted to protest, to maintain some shred of dignity, but she was too weak. His hands were gentle and impersonal as he checked her feet and fingers for frostbite. "You are lucky," he said. "Cold, but I do not see any blackening. We got to you in time, but you need to warm up slowly or it will hurt like hell." He was right. As her body began to thaw, pain lanced through her extremities, sharp and burning. Violet bit her lip to keep from crying out, but tears leaked from the corners of her eyes. Fletcher saw them and his expression softened. He brought her a cup of something hot, lifting her head so she could drink. "Broth," he explained. "Found some dried beef and made it with snow water. It is not much, but it will help. Drink slowly." The broth was weak but hot, and it felt like heaven sliding down her throat. Violet drank as much as she could manage before sinking back against the thin pillow. Fletcher set the cup aside and pulled a chair close to the stove, positioning himself where he could watch both her and the door. "Rest now," he said. "You are safe here. Those men will not find us in this storm, and even if they do, they will have to go through me first." Violet believed him. Despite everything she had been through, despite her fear and exhaustion, she believed this stranger who had appeared out of the blizzard like an answer to a prayer she had not known how to say. She let her eyes close, and this time when sleep claimed her, it was deep and dreamless. When Violet woke, Pale light was filtering through the cabin's single grimy window. The storm was still raging outside, but the cabin was blessedly warm. She turned her head and saw Fletcher sitting in the same chair, cleaning a rifle with practiced efficiency. He must have sensed her movement because he looked up and a small smile touched his lips. "Welcome back," he said. "How do you feel?" Violet took inventory of her body. Everything ached, and her fingers and toes still throbbed painfully, but the bone-deep cold was gone. "Better," she said, surprised to find it was true. "Much better, thank you, you saved my life." Fletcher shrugged, looking uncomfortable with her gratitude. "Just doing what anyone would do." "No," Violet said firmly, pushing herself up to sitting despite her protesting muscles. "Not just anyone. Those men could have found us. You put yourself at risk for a stranger. That means something." Their eyes met, and something passed between them, something electric and unexpected. Fletcher looked away first, returning his attention to his rifle. "Tell me what happened," he said. "From the beginning. I need to know everything if I am going to track these men." So Violet told him. She spoke of taking the job with the stage line, desperate for the money that would let her book passage back to Boston. She described the route through the mountains, the unexpected stop where the driver had seemed nervous. Then the ambush, the gunshots, the driver falling from his seat with blood spreading across his chest. She told him about hiding under the canvas, about hearing the men argue over where the payroll was hidden, about their rough laughter and crude comments about what they would do if they found any women. "The driver never told them anything," Violet said, her voice breaking. "They shot him again and again, but he never told. Finally, the one with the scar, this Malone, he got angry and told them to search everything. That is when they found me." Fletcher's hands had stilled on the rifle, his knuckles white with tension. "How did you get away?" "I ran," Violet said simply. "One of them grabbed me, but I had a hairpin, one of those long steel ones. I stabbed it into his hand and he let go. Then I just ran. I heard them shouting behind me, heard gunshots, but I kept running. I did not stop until I could not hear them anymore." "That was 3 days ago," Fletcher said. "You have been running ever since." "I tried to circle back to Deadwood, but I got turned around in the mountains. Then the storm came and I just kept moving because I knew if I stopped, I would freeze. I thought I was going to die up there on that rock. I had given up. Then you came." "I am glad I found you in time," Fletcher said, and there was something in his voice that made Violet's heart beat faster. He cleared his throat and stood up, setting the rifle aside. "Storm should blow itself out by tomorrow. Once it does, I will take you into Deadwood, get you somewhere safe. Then I will go after Malone and his gang." "What if they come after me?" Violet asked, voicing the fear that had been gnawing at her. "They know I saw them. They know I can identify them." "They will not touch you," Fletcher said with quiet certainty. "I will make sure of that." The conviction in his voice sent a shiver through Violet that had nothing to do with cold. She studied him in the gray light, really looking at him for the first time. He was younger than she had initially thought, probably no more than 28 or 29. His face was handsome in a rugged way, all strong lines and sharp angles. There was a scar above his left eyebrow, and his nose looked like it had been broken at least once. But it was his eyes that caught her, those startling blue eyes that seemed to see right through her. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "Hunting these men, being a bounty hunter, it seems like a hard life." Fletcher was silent for a long moment, staring into the stove's glowing heart. "It is the only life I know," he finally said. "My father was a lawman in Texas. He was killed by outlaws when I was 16. My mother died 6 months later, just gave up without him. I spent the next few years drifting, angry at the world. Then I met a U.S. Marshal named Sam Cooper. He took me under his wing, taught me how to track, how to shoot, how to survive. He also taught me that there is such a thing as justice, even out here where the law is thin as paper." "What happened to him?" Violet asked softly. "Got shot in a gunfight in Dodge City 5 years ago." "He lived, but he was too broken up to keep doing the work. Last I heard, he had retired to a farm in Missouri." Fletcher smiled, but it was tinged with sadness. "I keep doing this because someone has to. Men like Malone, they think they can do whatever they want out here, hurt whoever they want. Someone has to stop them." Violet felt something shift inside her, a recognition of the loneliness in Fletcher's words that mirrored her own. They were both adrift, both searching for something in this hard land. "You are a good man, Fletcher Rourke," she said. He looked at her then, really looked at her, and the intensity in his gaze made her breath catch. "I am just a man," he said. "Nothing more, nothing less. But I am glad I found you, Violet Garrett, real glad." The day passed slowly, the storm keeping them confined to the small cabin. Fletcher made more broth and produced some hardtack from his saddlebags, which they ate in companionable silence. As Violet's strength returned, they talked more, sharing stories of their lives. Fletcher told her about growing up in Texas, about learning to ride before he could walk, about the vast sky and endless prairie. Violet spoke of Boston, of cobblestone streets and gas lamps, of the ocean and the rigid society that had both sheltered and stifled her. "You miss it?" Fletcher asked. "The East," Violet considered the question. A week ago she would have said yes without hesitation. Now, looking at this rough man in this rougher cabin, feeling more alive than she had in years despite nearly dying, she was not so sure. "I miss some things," she admitted. "My mother died when I was young, but I miss the memory of her. I miss feeling safe. But I do not miss the narrowness of that life, the way everything was decided for me before I even had a chance to think about what I wanted." "What do you want?" Fletcher asked, his blue eyes fixed on her face. No one had ever asked her that before. Violet opened her mouth to answer, then closed it again, realizing she did not know. What did she want? Not to go back to Boston and the ruin of her father's reputation. Not to be alone and afraid. But beyond that, the future was a blank canvas. "I want to choose," she finally said. "I want my life to be mine." Fletcher nodded slowly. "I understand that. Freedom is about the only thing worth having out here." As evening fell, Fletcher insisted that Violet take the bunk while he made himself a bedroll on the floor near the stove. She protested, but he was immovable, and she was still too weak to argue much. As she lay in the narrow bed, wrapped in blankets that smelled of smoke and leather, Violet found herself watching Fletcher's silhouette in the firelight. She felt safe with him in a way that went beyond just physical protection. He had seen her at her weakest, her most vulnerable, and he had treated her with nothing but respect and kindness. It was a dangerous feeling, she knew. She barely knew this man. In a few days, he would deliver her to Deadwood and ride off to hunt the men who had tried to kill her. She would likely never see him again. The thought created an ache in her chest that she tried to ignore as she finally drifted off to sleep. The next morning dawned clear and brutally cold. The storm had passed, leaving behind a world transformed by snow. Everything was white and sparkling, beautiful and deadly. Fletcher was already up when Violet woke, checking his supplies and preparing for the journey to Deadwood. "How far is it?" Violet asked as she tried to make herself presentable. Her dress was a disaster, stained and torn, but there was nothing to be done about it. "About 8 miles, but the snow will slow us down. We should make it by mid-afternoon if we leave soon." Fletcher hesitated, then added, "There is a woman in Deadwood runs a boarding house. Her name is Martha Henderson, and she is good people. I will take you to her. She will help you figure out what comes next." Violet nodded, trying to ignore the sinking feeling in her stomach. This was the beginning of the end, the start of saying goodbye to this man who had saved her life and made her feel things she had not expected to feel. She told herself not to be foolish, that gratitude and attraction born of extreme circumstances were not the same as anything real or lasting. But her heart was not listening to her head. The ride to Deadwood was long and cold, but nothing like the desperate flight through the mountains. Violet sat in front of Fletcher on his horse, his arms around her as he handled the reins. She tried not to think about how right it felt to be held like this, how perfectly she seemed to fit against him. They spoke little, saving their energy for the journey, but the silence was comfortable, almost intimate. As they descended from the high country, the landscape began to change. Pine forests gave way to the familiar sight of mining camps and rough trails. Then, rounding a bend, they saw Deadwood spread out in the gulch below, a sprawling collection of buildings that seemed to have been thrown together with more hope than planning. Deadwood was exactly what Violet expected from a Black Hills mining town. The main street was a churned-up mess of mud and snow, lined with saloons, gambling halls, general stores, and various other establishments of varying reputation. Men hurried along the wooden sidewalks, most of them miners or prospectors, their faces weathered and hopeful in equal measure. The sound of hammering and sawing filled the air, the constant noise of a town still building itself. Fletcher guided his horse through the chaos, clearly familiar with the streets. He stopped in front of a two-story building that looked marginally more respectable than its neighbors. A sign out front read, "Henderson's Boarding House Clean Rooms, Good Food." Fletcher dismounted and helped Violet down, his hands steady on her waist. "Wait here," he said, then disappeared inside. He returned a moment later with a woman who looked to be in her 50s, stout and solid with graying hair pulled back in a severe bun. Her eyes, however, were kind as they took in Violet's bedraggled appearance. "Lord have mercy," Martha Henderson said. "You poor child, come inside right now. Fletcher, you bring her things." "She does not have any things," Fletcher said quietly. "She lost everything." Martha's expression hardened. "I heard about that stage driver. Terrible business. Well, come on then, dear. We will get you warm and fed and into some proper clothes." Violet looked back at Fletcher, suddenly desperate not to leave him. "Will you stay for a little while?" Something flickered in his blue eyes, something that might have been relief. "I need to talk to the sheriff anyway. I will come back and check on you before I leave town." It was not a promise to stay, but it was something. Violet let Martha lead her inside, into a world of clean floors and the smell of cooking food. The boarding house was simple but well kept, with lace curtains on the windows and a warmth that had nothing to do with the stoves. Martha took charge with the efficiency of a general commanding troops. Within an hour, Violet had been fed a proper meal, given a hot bath in a real tub, and dressed in clean clothes that Martha had found from somewhere. They were a bit too large, but they were whole and warm, and Violet nearly cried with gratitude. "Now then," Martha said, settling into a chair across from Violet in the small parlor. "Fletcher told me a bit about what happened to you. You have had a terrible time of it, but you are safe here. I run a respectable house and no one bothers my girls." "I cannot pay you," Violet said, the words painful to admit. "I had some money, but it was in my bag on the stage." Martha waved a hand dismissively. "We will worry about that later. For now, you need rest and time to heal. When you are feeling better, if you want to help around the house to earn your keep, we can arrange that. I could use someone with good handwriting to help with my accounts. These old eyes are not what they used to be." The kindness was almost too much. Violet felt tears welling up, and this time she could not stop them. Martha made a sympathetic noise and moved to sit beside her, putting a comforting arm around her shoulders. "There now, you cry it out. You have earned the right to cry, but remember you survived. That counts for something." Violet did cry, great heaving sobs that came from somewhere deep inside. She cried for the fear and the cold, for the driver who had died protecting her, for the life she had lost, and the uncertain future ahead. Martha held her through it all, this stranger who showed her more kindness than her own family ever had. When the tears finally subsided, Violet felt emptied out but somehow lighter. Martha patted her hand and stood up. "I am going to make you some tea and then you are going to rest. Your room is at the top of the stairs, second door on the right. It is not much, but it is clean and quiet." As Martha bustled off to the kitchen, Violet heard the front door open. Her heart leaped, hoping it was Fletcher, but instead a young woman entered, probably no more than 19 or 20. She had red hair and freckles and a friendly smile. "You must be Violet," the girl said. "I am Sarah, I work here, help Martha with the cooking and cleaning. She told me what happened. That must have been terrifying." "It was," Violet admitted, "but I am trying not to think about it anymore." Sarah sat down in the chair Martha had vacated. "Fletcher Rourke is the one who found you, right? I heard Martha talking to him. He is very handsome, is he not, and a hero rescuing you like that." Violet felt her cheeks warm. "He was kind. He saved my life." "I saw the way he looked at you when he brought you in," Sarah said with a knowing smile. "Like he did not want to let you go. You should have seen his face when Martha practically dragged you inside. He looked like someone had taken away his favorite horse." "You are imagining things," Violet said, but her heart was beating faster. "He is just making sure I am safe. Then he will go after the men who killed that driver." Sarah shrugged. "Maybe, but I have lived in Deadwood for 2 years and I know Fletcher Rourke. He has brought in a dozen criminals in that time, and I have never seen him look at anyone the way he looked at you. I am just saying, keep an open mind." Before Violet could respond, Martha returned with tea, and Sarah excused herself to help with dinner preparations. Violet sipped her tea and tried not to think about what Sarah had said, tried not to hope. But hope was a stubborn thing, and it had taken root in her chest whether she wanted it there or not. Fletcher did not return that day, or the next. Violet tried not to worry, tried to tell herself that he was busy with the sheriff, planning how to track down Malone's gang. But as the third day dawned with no word, she found it harder to keep her fears at bay. What if something had happened to him? What if he had already left Deadwood, gone after the outlaws without saying goodbye? Martha must have noticed her distraction because she finally said, "Fletcher is fine. He is staying at the livery stable, helping the owner with some work in exchange for boarding his horse. He has been asking about you too. Wants to know how you are doing. He does." Violet tried to keep the eagerness out of her voice and failed. Martha smiled. "He does. That man has been through here 3 times in the past 2 days, each time asking if you are well, if you need anything. I finally told him to just come inside and see for himself, but he says he does not want to disturb you." "He would not be disturbing me," Violet said quickly. "I would like to see him, to thank him properly." "I will let him know," Martha said with a knowing look that reminded Violet of Sarah's comments. That evening, as Violet was helping Sarah set the table for dinner, there was a knock at the door. Martha answered it, and Violet heard Fletcher's deep voice in the hallway. Her hands trembled as she set down the plates. "Violet," Martha called, "you have a visitor." Fletcher stood in the parlor, hat in his hands, looking oddly nervous. He had cleaned up since she had last seen him, his hair damp from a recent washing and his jaw freshly shaved. He looked younger without the stubble and somehow even more handsome. When he saw her, his face lit up with a smile that made Violet's heart skip. "Miss Garrett," he said formally, "you look well. Much better than when I last saw you." "Thanks to you," Violet said. "Will you stay for dinner?" "Please, it is the least I can do." Fletcher glanced at Martha, who nodded encouragingly. "I suppose I could, if it is not too much trouble." "No trouble at all," Martha said firmly. "Set another place, Sarah. Fletcher, you go wash up, you know where." Dinner was a lively affair. Besides Violet, Sarah, and Martha, there were 3 other boarders, all miners who worked claims in the surrounding hills. They were rough but respectful men who clearly held Martha in high regard. They were curious about Violet but too polite to pry, and they greeted Fletcher like an old friend. "Heard you are going after Jack Malone," one of them said, a grizzled man named Tom. "That is dangerous work. Malone is mean and his boys are worse." "I have dealt with worse," Fletcher said calmly. "Besides, they made it personal when they killed that driver and tried to hurt Miss Garrett." The way he said it, the protective edge in his voice, sent warmth spreading through Violet's chest. She caught Martha watching them with an approving expression, and even Sarah was trying not to look smug. After dinner, Fletcher helped clear the table despite Martha's protests. When the work was done, he turned to Violet and said, "Would you like to take a walk? I know it is cold, but Martha says you have been cooped up inside for days. Some fresh air might do you good." Violet agreed immediately, and Martha produced a heavy cloak for her to borrow. They stepped out into the evening, where the cold air was crisp and clear, filled with the sounds of deadwood settling in for the night. Piano music drifted from the saloons, punctuated by occasional laughter and shouts. Fletcher offered his arm, and Violet took it, feeling the solid strength of him through the fabric of his coat. They walked in silence for a while, just moving through the town, and Violet found herself relaxing in a way she had not since before the attack. "I am glad you are all right," Fletcher finally said. "I have been worried about you. Martha said you have been checking on me. You did not have to do that." "I wanted to." Fletcher stopped walking and turned to face her, his blue eyes serious in the lamplight spilling from a nearby window. "Violet, I need to be honest with you. I am going after Malone and his gang. The sheriff has agreed to deputize me and we are riding out in 2 days. It is going to be dangerous and there is a chance I might not come back." Fear clenched Violet's stomach. "Then do not go. Let someone else do it." "I have to go. It is what I do, and these men need to be stopped. But before I leave, I need to know that you are going to be all right. Martha says she would be happy to have you stay as long as you need. She thinks you could help her run the boarding house, maybe even become a partner eventually if things work out." "That is generous of her," Violet said, though she was barely thinking about Martha's offer. All she could think about was Fletcher riding into danger, maybe never coming back. "Fletcher, please be careful. I could not bear it if something happened to you." He reached up and gently touched her face, his calloused fingers warm against her cold cheek. "I will be as careful as I can be. But Violet, I need to know something. These past few days, I have not been able to stop thinking about you. I know it is crazy, we barely know each other, but when I am around you, I feel something I have not felt in a long time. Maybe ever. I need to know if you feel it too, or if I am just a fool making something out of gratitude and circumstance." Violet's breath caught. She looked up into his face, at the hope and vulnerability there, and knew she could not lie. "You are not a fool. I feel it too. I tried to tell myself it was just gratitude, that I was confused because you saved me. But it is more than that. When I am with you, I feel safe. I feel seen. And the thought of you leaving, of maybe never seeing you again, it hurts in a way I do not understand." Fletcher's face transformed, joy and relief chasing away the tension. He cupped her face in both hands now, his touch infinitely gentle. "Then when I come back, can I come see you? Can we see where this goes?" "Yes," Violet whispered. Yes, please come back. Promise me you will come back. I promise, Fletcher said, and then he was kissing her. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, a question more than a demand. But when Violet responded, pressing closer to him, it deepened into something that made her forget the cold, forget the town around them, forget everything except the feeling of his mouth on hers and his arms wrapping around her. It was her first real kiss, and it felt like coming home. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Fletcher rested his forehead against hers. I will come back to you, he said fiercely. I swear it, Violet, I will come back. They walked back to the boarding house hand in hand, neither wanting to let go. At the door, Fletcher kissed her again, softer this time, a promise rather than a goodbye. I will come see you tomorrow before I leave, he said. There are things I want to tell you, things I want you to know before I go. Violet nodded, not trusting her voice. She watched him walk away into the darkness, and only then did she allow herself to cry, quiet tears of fear and hope mixed together. The next day passed too quickly. Fletcher came by in the morning, and they walked through Deadwood together, talking about everything and nothing. He told her about his childhood, about his dreams of owning a ranch someday, a place where he could raise horses and maybe build something lasting. Violet talked about her love of books, her secret dream of teaching, of making a difference in people's lives. You could do that here, Fletcher said. Deadwood needs a teacher. The town is growing and there are families now, not just miners, children who need education. I never thought about staying here, Violet admitted. I always assumed I would go back east eventually. Is that what you want, to go back? Violet thought about it, really thought about it. A week ago, the answer would have been an automatic yes. But now, looking at this rough town with its rough people, thinking about Martha and Sarah and the miners who had welcomed her at dinner, thinking about Fletcher and the way he made her feel, the answer was not so clear. I do not know any more. Maybe I could make a life here. Maybe that is what I want. Fletcher smiled, that rare, beautiful smile that transformed his face. I would like that. I would like that very much. That evening, Fletcher came for dinner again. Afterward, he and Violet sat in the parlor while Martha and Sarah tactfully gave them privacy. Fletcher held her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. I am leaving before dawn tomorrow, he said. The sheriff and I have a lead on where Malone's gang is holed up. There is an old mining camp about 20 miles from here, abandoned last year. Someone saw smoke from that direction, and it matches what I have learned about Malone's patterns. He likes to use abandoned camps. How long will you be gone? Violet asked, dreading the answer. A week, maybe 2. Depends on whether the lead pans out and how hard they are to track. Fletcher squeezed her hand. But I will come back. I have too much to live for now. They talked until Martha gently suggested it was time for Fletcher to leave. At the door, Fletcher kissed Violet one more time, a kiss full of longing and promise. Wait for me, he whispered against her lips. Always, Violet whispered back. Then he was gone, and Violet climbed the stairs to her small room with a heavy heart. She did not sleep much that night, listening to every sound, imagining she could hear Fletcher riding out into the darkness even though she knew that was impossible. The days that followed were the longest of Violet's life. She threw herself into work at the boarding house, helping Martha with everything from cooking to cleaning to managing the accounts. Martha was right. Violet did have good handwriting and a head for numbers, and she found satisfaction in bringing order to Martha's chaotic record-keeping. She also began teaching Sarah to read better. The younger woman could manage basic words but wanted to improve, and Violet discovered she enjoyed teaching, enjoyed seeing Sarah's face light up when she successfully read a difficult passage. Word spread, and soon 2 of the miners were asking for lessons too. Violet started holding informal classes in the parlor 3 evenings a week, and Martha beamed with approval. "You are a natural teacher," Martha said, "and people respect you. That is not easy to earn in a town like this." A week passed with no word from Fletcher. Violet tried not to worry, tried to trust his promise, but fear was a constant companion. She had heard stories about Jack Malone now, about the trail of violence he had left across the territories. The man was a killer, ruthless and cunning, and his gang was loyal to the point of fanaticism. On the 10th day, a rider came into town bringing news. There had been a gunfight at the old mining camp. The sheriff was dead, shot trying to arrest Malone. 3 of the gang members were also dead, but Malone and 1 other man had escaped. There was no word on Fletcher. Violet felt the world tilt beneath her. Martha grabbed her arm, steadying her. "Now, we do not know anything for certain," Martha said firmly. "Fletcher is smart and capable. If anyone could survive that, it would be him." But Violet could not shake the cold dread that had settled in her stomach. She went through the motions of her day, but her mind was elsewhere, imagining terrible possibilities. By nightfall, she had convinced herself that Fletcher was dead, that she would never see him again, that she had been a fool to let herself care so much. She was sitting in her room, staring out the window at the dark street below, when she heard a commotion downstairs. Raised voices, Martha exclaiming something. Violet's heart leaped into her throat as she ran for the stairs. Fletcher stood in the parlor, and Violet's relief was so intense she nearly collapsed. He looked terrible, his face haggard and his left arm bound in a rough sling. There was dried blood on his coat and exhaustion in every line of his body. But he was alive. He was alive. Violet flew down the remaining stairs and threw herself into his arms, not caring who saw, not caring about propriety or dignity. Fletcher caught her with his good arm, holding her tight against him, his face buried in her hair. "I am here," he said hoarsely. "I am here. I promised I would come back." Martha shooed everyone out of the room, giving them privacy. Violet pulled back just enough to look at Fletcher's face, her hands framing it. "I heard the sheriff was killed. I thought you might be dead too." "It was close," Fletcher admitted. "We walked into an ambush. Malone had lookouts we did not spot. The sheriff went down in the first volley. I managed to get to cover and took out 3 of them, but Malone and 1 of his men got away in the confusion. I tracked them for 2 days before I lost the trail in the hills. I had to come back, let the wound in my arm heal before I could keep going." "You are hurt." Violet looked at the sling with alarm. "How badly?" "Bullet grazed me, nothing serious. It just needs time to heal. You need to rest, you need proper food and sleep." "I know, I will. But I had to see you first. I had to let you know I was all right." Fletcher touched her face with his good hand, his blue eyes searching hers. "I thought about you every moment I was out there. When the bullets were flying and everything was chaos, the only thing that kept me going was knowing you were waiting for me, knowing I had to survive so I could come back to you." Violet kissed him then, not caring that Martha might come back in, not caring about anything except the fact that he was alive and in her arms. When they broke apart, Fletcher was smiling despite his obvious exhaustion. "Marry me," he said. Violet blinked, certain she had misheard. "What?" "Marry me," Fletcher repeated. "I know it is fast. I know people will say we are crazy. But I am 30 years old and I have never felt about anyone the way I feel about you. I do not want to waste time pretending otherwise. I want to build a life with you, Violet. I want to give up bounty hunting and buy that ranch I told you about. I want to come home to you every night and wake up next to you every morning. I want to have children with you and grow old with you. So marry me, please." Violet's heart felt like it might burst. "Yes," she said, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, I will marry you. I love you, Fletcher Rourke. I think I have loved you since you wrapped me in your coat and promised I would be safe." "I love you too," Fletcher said and kissed her again. Martha came bustling back in, took one look at their faces, and burst into delighted laughter. "Well, it is about time. Sarah owes me $5. I bet her it would not take more than 2 weeks." Despite everything, Violet found herself laughing. Fletcher was laughing too, the sound rusty but genuine. For the first time since the attack on the stagecoach, Violet felt truly happy, truly safe. The future stretched before her, full of possibility instead of fear. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Fletcher recuperated at the boarding house, with Violet tending his wound and Martha feeding him enough for 3 men. The whole town seemed to know about their engagement within days, and people Violet had never met congratulated her on the street. She learned that Fletcher was well respected in Deadwood, known for his fairness and his willingness to help people in need. While Fletcher healed, he made inquiries about buying land for his ranch. There was a valley about 10 miles from Deadwood, good grassland with a stream running through it, and a stand of timber for building. The owner was willing to sell at a fair price, and Fletcher put down everything he had saved from his bounty hunting to secure it. "It is not much yet," he told Violet as they stood on the land together, looking at the sweeping vista of mountains and sky. "Just raw land, but we can build something here. A house, a barn, corrals for the horses. It will take time and hard work, but we can make it into something good." "It is beautiful," Violet said honestly. She could see it, see the life they would build here. "We can make it a home." They were married on a Sunday afternoon in early April, just as the first green was beginning to show on the hills. The ceremony was held at the boarding house, with Martha and Sarah as witnesses and half of Deadwood in attendance. Violet wore a simple blue dress that Martha had helped her make, and Fletcher wore his Sunday best, looking handsome and nervous in equal measure. The local minister performed the ceremony, his words about love and commitment taking on extra weight given everything Violet and Fletcher had been through. When Fletcher slipped a simple gold band onto her finger, Violet felt tears of joy sliding down her cheeks. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Fletcher kissed her with a tenderness that made everyone in the room sigh. The celebration afterward was loud and joyous, with music and dancing and more food than Violet had ever seen. Miners she had been teaching toasted them with whiskey, and Martha cried happy tears. As the sun set and the party showed no signs of slowing, Fletcher pulled Violet aside. "Ready to go home, Mrs. Rourke?" he asked with a smile that made her stomach flutter. "Yes," Violet said. "I am ready." They had built a small cabin on their land over the past weeks, just 2 rooms for now, but it had a good roof and solid walls and a stone fireplace that Fletcher had mortared himself. It was not much compared to the houses Violet had known in Boston, but as Fletcher carried her over the threshold, she knew it was more than enough. It was theirs. Their wedding night was tender and sweet, Fletcher taking his time to show Violet all the ways love could be expressed. She had been nervous, knowing so little about the physical aspect of marriage, but Fletcher was patient and gentle, making sure she felt safe and cherished. When they finally came together, it felt like the most natural thing in the world, the final piece clicking into place. Afterward, as they lay tangled together in the narrow bed, Fletcher stroked her hair and whispered, "I never thought I would have this. A home, a wife, a future that is about more than just the next bounty. You gave me that, Violet. You gave me everything. You gave me my life," Violet said. "And then you gave me a reason to live it. I was so lost before you found me. Now I know exactly where I belong." The months that followed were hard work but filled with joy. They rose with the sun each day and worked until dark, building their ranch one piece at a time. Fletcher taught Violet to ride, and she proved to be a natural horsewoman. They bought their first horses in May, 3 mares and a promising young stallion that Fletcher had his eye on for breeding. Violet continued teaching in town twice a week, riding in with Fletcher when he went for supplies. Her informal school had grown to include a dozen students of varying ages, and there was talk of building a proper schoolhouse. Violet loved the work, loved seeing her students' faces light up as new worlds opened to them through reading. By summer, their cabin had grown to 4 rooms, and they had built a barn and corrals. Fletcher hired 2 ranch hands, young men looking to learn the horse trade, and the place began to feel like a real operation. They had their first successful foals born in June, wobbly-legged colts that made Violet laugh with delight. It was in August that Violet began to suspect she might be carrying a child. She said nothing at first, afraid to hope, but when another month passed and her suspicions only grew stronger, she finally told Fletcher. His face lit up with such pure joy that Violet knew their child would be deeply loved. "A baby," Fletcher said wonderingly, his hand gentle on her still flat stomach. "We are going to have a baby. Are you happy?" Violet asked, though she could see the answer in his face. "Happy does not begin to cover it. Violet, you have given me everything I never knew I wanted. I cannot wait to meet this child, to teach him to ride, to watch you be a mother." "Or her," Violet said with a smile. "It could be a girl. A daughter like you would be a blessing beyond measure." As fall painted the mountains gold and red, Violet's pregnancy progressed. She felt good, healthy and strong, though Fletcher became almost comically protective, trying to prevent her from doing any work he deemed too strenuous. Martha visited often, full of advice and hand-knitted baby clothes. It was in October, as the first snows began to dust the high peaks, that they finally got news about Jack Malone. A U.S. Marshal had tracked him to a hideout in Wyoming and killed him in a gunfight. Malone's last gang member had been captured and hanged. The threat that had hung over them was finally, truly gone. "It is over," Violet said that night, safe in Fletcher's arms. "Really over." "A new beginning," Fletcher agreed, "for all of us." Their son was born in March of 1879, arriving during a late-season snowstorm that reminded Violet eerily of the blizzard that had nearly killed her. But this time, she was warm and safe, surrounded by people who loved her. Martha attended the birth, her experienced hands guiding Violet through the pain. When she finally held her baby boy, red-faced and squalling, Violet felt a love so fierce it took her breath away. "What should we name him?" Fletcher asked, his voice choked with emotion as he looked at his son for the first time. "Samuel," Violet said without hesitation. "After the marshal who saved you and taught you to be the man you are." Fletcher's eyes filled with tears. "Samuel Rourke. It is perfect." Baby Samuel was a good child, healthy and happy, with his father's blue eyes and his mother's dark hair. Watching Fletcher with their son, seeing the gentle way he held the baby and the wonder on his face, Violet fell in love with her husband all over again. The years that followed were good ones. The ranch prospered, Fletcher's reputation as a horse breeder growing throughout the territories. Violet's school became official in 1880, with a proper building and funding from the territorial government. She taught 5 days a week during the school year, with Fletcher's full support and help with Samuel. A daughter arrived in 1881, a tiny, delicate girl they named Rose, who proved to have her father's stubborn streak and her mother's intelligence. Then another son in 1883, Thomas, who was quiet and thoughtful from the start. Their cabin grew into a proper house, added onto room by room as their family expanded. By 1885, they were among the most respected families in the region. Fletcher had given up bounty hunting completely. though he occasionally helped the local sheriff with tracking when needed. Violet's school had graduated its first class of students, several of whom went on to continue their education back east. The ranch employed 6 hands and had horses that were sought after from Montana to Texas. On a spring evening in 1885, Violet stood on the porch of their house, watching the sun set over the mountains. Fletcher came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. Their children were playing in the yard, their laughter carrying on the breeze. "You ever regret it?" Fletcher asked quietly. "Giving up your chance to go back east?" "All of this is so far from the life you were raised for." Violet turned in his arms, looking up at the man who had saved her life in more ways than one. His face had gained some lines over the years. His hair was touched with gray at the temples, but his blue eyes were as sharp and warm as ever. "Not for a single moment," she said. "That day you found me, trembling from cold and fear, you did not just warm them away. You gave me a life I never could have imagined. You gave me love and purpose and a family. You gave me a home. How could I possibly regret that?" Fletcher kissed her slow and deep, a kiss that still made her heart race after all these years. "I love you, Violet Rourke, more today than yesterday and less than I will tomorrow." "I love you too," Violet said. "Always." As they stood there together, watching their children play under the vast Montana sky, Violet thought back to that desperate girl huddled in the snow, certain she was going to die. She had been so lost then, so afraid. But that fear had led her to Fletcher, and Fletcher had led her to this life, this family, this happiness. The years continued to pass in their steady rhythm. Samuel grew into a fine young man who loved horses as much as his father, taking over more and more of the ranch work as Fletcher's back began to protest the hard labor. Rose proved to be a gifted teacher herself, working alongside Violet in the school and showing a particular talent for teaching the younger children. Thomas discovered a love for books and numbers, and Fletcher and Violet scraped together the money to send him to college in Denver. More grandchildren came, first Samuel's children with his wife Emma, a practical woman from a neighboring ranch, then Rose's children with her husband, a Deadwood shopkeeper's son. The house continued to grow, rooms added to accommodate the expanding family that gathered for holidays and special occasions. Through it all, Fletcher and Violet remained each other's anchor. They still rode together sometimes, just the two of them, out across their land as the sun rose. They still sat together on the porch in the evenings, hands entwined, watching the mountains change color with the seasons. They had weathered hard times together, droughts and harsh winters, the occasional illness or injury that came with ranch life. But they had weathered them together, their love growing deeper and stronger with each passing year. By 1895, Fletcher's hair was fully silver and Violet's had gained threads of gray. They were grandparents to 8, with another on the way. The ranch was a thriving operation, one of the most successful in the region. Violet's school had become a model for other rural schools, and she had trained a generation of teachers who spread out across the territories. On their 20th wedding anniversary, their children and grandchildren gathered at the ranch for a celebration. There was music and dancing, and a feast that reminded Violet of their wedding day. Late in the evening, after the children had been tucked into various beds throughout the house, Violet and Fletcher slipped away to the porch, their favorite spot. 20 years, Violet marveled. It feels like both forever and no time at all. Best 20 years of my life, Fletcher said. He was slower now, his movements careful, but his grip on her hand was as strong as ever. "Do you remember that day I found you? How scared you were? I remember thinking I was going to die. Then I remember thinking you were one of the men who wanted to kill me." Then I remember realizing you were going to save me. Violet smiled. I did not realize then that you were going to save me every day for the rest of my life. You saved me right back, Fletcher said. I was so lost before you, Violet, just drifting, no real purpose beyond the next bounty. You gave me a reason to build something, to be something more than just a man with a gun. You gave me a family, a legacy. You gave me joy. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, looking out at the land they had built together, the home they had created. The mountains stood eternal against the star-filled sky, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote called. "What do you think will happen to all of this when we are gone?" Violet asked. "The ranch, the school, everything we have built, it will continue," Fletcher said with certainty. "Samuel will run the ranch, and he will teach his children, and they will teach theirs. Rose and the other teachers will keep the school going. What we built will outlast us, Violet. That is the whole point. We are leaving the world a little better than we found it." "I like that thought," Violet said. As they headed inside, Fletcher stopped in the doorway and looked back at the porch, the yard, the barn, and corrals beyond. "You know what I am most grateful for?" he asked. "What?" "That storm. That terrible blizzard that nearly killed you. Because if it had not happened, if you had not been running for your life, if I had not been tracking those men, we never would have found each other. Our children would not exist. This life would not exist. So as terrible as that day was, I am grateful for it, because it brought me you." Violet felt tears prick her eyes. After all these years, Fletcher could still make her cry with his words. "I am grateful too. For the storm, for you finding me, for every moment since. I would not change a thing." They lived many more years together, Fletcher and Violet, growing old on their ranch surrounded by family and love. Fletcher passed first, in the spring of 1903, dying peacefully in his sleep with Violet holding his hand. He was 74 years old, and he had lived a full and meaningful life. Violet lived another 5 years, continuing to teach until her health finally forced her to retire. She spent her final years surrounded by her children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, telling them stories of the old days, of Deadwood in its wild youth, of a blizzard and a cowboy and a love that had changed everything. When Violet Rourke died in the winter of 1908, at the age of 72, she was buried next to Fletcher on a hill overlooking their ranch. The whole community turned out for her funeral, generations of former students and ranch hands and families they had helped over the years. The school was renamed in her honor, and the ranch continued to thrive under Samuel's stewardship. Their story became a legend in that part of Montana. The tale of how a cowboy had found a dying woman in a blizzard and saved her, how that act of kindness had blossomed into a love that built an empire. Old-timers would tell it to newcomers, embellishing some details, getting others wrong, but always capturing the essential truth. That love could bloom even in the harshest conditions, that two people could build something beautiful out of desperation and fear, that sometimes the worst moments of our lives lead us to the best. The ranch still stands today, passed down through generations of Rourkes. The school Violet founded is long gone, replaced by more modern facilities, but a plaque marks where it once stood. And on a hill overlooking the valley, 2 weathered headstones stand side by side, their inscriptions worn but still readable. Fletcher Rourke, 1849–1903. Beloved husband, father, grandfather. He saved her life, and she gave him one worth living. Violet Garrett Rourke, 1856–1908. Beloved wife, mother, grandmother, teacher. She was lost in the storm, and he brought her home. The mountains still stand eternal, watching over the valley where their story unfolded. The wind still howls through the passes in winter, cold and fierce. But the legacy of Fletcher and Violet remains, a testament to the power of love to transform lives, to build futures, to warm away even the deepest cold and fear. Their story began with a desperate woman and a determined man, with death stalking close and hope seeming impossible. But it ended with a life well lived, with children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren who carry their blood and their values forward. It ended with two people who loved each other deeply, completely, and forever, who built something lasting out of nothing, who proved that even in the wildest places, civilization can take root. And on cold winter nights, when the wind howls through the Montana mountains and the snow falls thick and heavy, some say you can still feel their presence on that hill. Two spirits standing together, watching over the land they loved, the family they created, the legacy they left behind. Fletcher and Violet Rourke, the cowboy and the woman he saved, whose love story became legend, whose lives together proved that sometimes the best things come from the worst moments, that fear and cold can be warmed away by the power of human connection, by courage, by kindness, by love. Their children grew old and had children of their own. Their ranch became one of the most successful in Montana, known throughout the West for quality horses and fair dealing. Their school produced hundreds of educated citizens who spread out across the country, carrying with them the values Violet had instilled. The Rourke name became synonymous with integrity, hard work, and family values. But beyond all the practical achievements, beyond the success and the legacy, what Fletcher and Violet really left behind was a love story. A reminder that in even the darkest moments, when all seems lost, salvation can come from unexpected places. That a stranger's kindness can change the course of a life. That love, real love, can bloom in the harshest soil and weather any storm. They had been two lost souls, Fletcher and Violet, wandering through life without knowing what they were searching for. Then fate, in the form of a terrible blizzard and desperate circumstances, brought them together. In saving Violet's life, Fletcher found his own purpose. In being saved, Violet discovered her own strength. Together, they built something neither could have achieved alone, a partnership that enriched not just their own lives but the lives of everyone they touched. That is the true legacy of Fletcher and Violet Rourke. Not the ranch or the school or the grandchildren, though all those things matter. The real legacy is the proof they provided that love conquers all, that hope exists even in despair, that the human spirit is capable of extraordinary things when given the chance. They showed that we are stronger together than apart, that kindness matters, that second chances exist, that it is never too late to find your purpose or your person. Their story reminds us that life can change in an instant. One moment Violet was dying alone on a mountain, certain her life was over. The next, she was being carried to safety by a man who would become her everything. One moment Fletcher was just another bounty hunter, living a solitary existence with no real connections. The next, he was holding a woman who would give his life meaning and purpose beyond anything he had imagined. We all have our storms, our moments of trembling from cold and fear. We all face times when we feel lost and alone, when hope seems impossible and death feels near. The story of Fletcher and Violet reminds us that even in those darkest moments, salvation might be just around the corner. That the person who will change our life might appear when we least expect it. That love and hope and warmth can drive away even the deepest cold and fear. And so their story endures, passed down through generations, a beacon of hope in hard times, a reminder of what matters most. Not wealth or status or power, but love, family, connection, the courage to keep going when giving up seems easier, the willingness to reach out to a stranger in need, the faith that tomorrow can be better than today, that we can build something beautiful out of broken pieces, that every ending can also be a beginning. Fletcher found Violet trembling from cold and fear, and he warmed both away. But she did the same for him, warming away the coldness of his lonely existence, the fear that he would never have a real home or family. They saved each other, and in doing so, created a legacy that would outlast them both, a love story for the ages, a reminder that even in the Wild West, even in the harshest conditions, love finds a way.